Tonight, Static Shock explains its clone problem by introducing more clones. The art in O.M.A.C finally makes it so my eyes don't bleed when I look at it. And either Damian Wayne aged an entire decade overnight, or Rob Liefeld has never seen a 10-year-old child before. All that and more this week on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 22 of the Not So New 52. I am your host, and little news story for you. 10 years ago today, or at some point in the past week, DC revealed their plans to create a prequel series for the comic epic Watchmen, calling it creatively enough Before Watchmen. Little spoiler alert from the future, it didn't do well, wasn't great. Did not succeed on capitalizing that fantastically. And as such, it is outside of the New 52, and I don't have to cover it. So take your small victories where you can get them. However, we do have comics that we do need to cover, so let's go ahead and hop right into it. February 1st, 2012 holds the number 6 issues of Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Red Lanterns, Green Arrow, Justice League International, Men of War, O.M.A.C, Stormwatch, Hawk and Dove, Static Shock, Animal Man, and Swamp Thing. There's some good comics in there. Just spoiling it right out the bat. Animal Man, Swamp Thing, oh, fantastic. The rest of it, hit or miss. But if you stick around to the end, and you can't skip, I forbid you from skipping. You're going to really like what you find, I promise. But we have to start somewhere, so let's start with comic number 1. Detective Comics number 6, everything by Tony S. Daniels. We left off last time with Batman losing a guy who he was chasing after through the streets after he mugged and killed some people. Charlotte Rivers, the reporter, trying to sneak into the Iceberg Lounge to investigate. And Penguin sending 3 enforcers after her, I suppose, after noticing what it is she's doing. This issue picks up with none of that. None of that comes back at all. It may as well be a news story. We have a woman and a guy who are on a beachfront property overlooking the Iceberg Casino, and they're talking about how they need to break in there. The girl is wearing an eye patch. Her name is Jill Hampton. We get that later, but I'm telling you now because it's easier to remember. And the guy, he tells Jill, hey, I need to break into the Iceberg Lounge, and Jill just produces this VIP card out of nowhere, and he's like, how'd you get this? She's like, well, how about you just focus on the job at hand? You need to change your face anyway. And we see that basically she punches his face off, and it's revealed that his name is Jack Houston, a.k.a. Snakeskin, and this is Batman's narration now of him just going through this whole thing of, he took some meds and got a payday, and then he gambled it all away and became an enforcer, and he's able to change his face. I guess that's the gist of it. But he's working with Jill Hampton for whatever reason. And then we cut over to Batman, and Batman is following some trail that involves his fingerprints killing some people. And he arrives at a motel that is just known for a bunch of crimes. He comes up to this bathtub that's just filled with blood, and inside is Raju, who, if you remember from 2 issues ago, was this character who showed up out of nowhere, was working for the Penguin, and now he's dead. So we really got a lot of mileage out of him. So they did some analyzing on him, feeding into the Batcave, and apparently his cell phone records they traced, and he called a guy named Nicholas Pogg, and also 3 conversations with Jill Hampton, who, as soon as Batman hears the name, he immediately turns off the comms and starts asking questions to the motel owner, who is himself a jerk. He pulls a gun on Batman as he comes around. Batman just angles it downwards, shoots his own toes off because of it, the motel owner, and Batman just stands there menacingly as the guy just spills I don't know nothing about no lady named Jill, but I did see a lady with an eye patch, so that's probably who you're looking for. So Batman leaves, and then we go to the Iceberg Casino, where Charlotte is just snooping around a room in a maid costume, and who comes in but Jill, who karate chops Charlotte, and then it's revealed, oh wait, we know each other. Not only do we know each other, they're sisters. Jill Hampton and Charlotte Rivers, who, yes, I did have to re-look up the last name of. So basically she's like, man, all right, what, you karate chopping me for no reason? She's like, why are you in my stuff? I know you're a reporter and a goody two-shoes, but you would never rat on your own sister. And then Jill's like, I have enough to put you away for life. And so Jill just like smashes a bottle and holds up the jagged glass. She's like, you want to dance? And then we just leave that scene. And I'm not kidding, it doesn't come back, like at all. So then we go to Penguin, who's at like his own little meeting with a bunch of D-tier villains. We have the Gas Man, Hypnotic, and Mr. Combustible. And basically, I guess from the last issue of the guys being targeted like for their money, these are like rich supervillains, and so they're all pooling their money with Penguin so that it can be safe. But of course Penguin's taking like a high fee for this, and they're all just basically bitching about that for like 2 pages. And we see that Jill is walking around picking up info because no one notices the help walking around picking up drinks. So she finds out that all their jewels are kept in a specific vault. Cut over, Batman, completely separate thing. He's following the Nicholas Pogg lead on the cell phones. He finds one of the guys, like, runners, I guess you want to say, named Smitty. He scares Smitty into talking, and they break into a place that is a weapons cache, because I guess Nicholas is in the drug running business or gun running business. And Smitty says, like, yeah, no, he was talking to that woman with the eye patch. She left that crate over there. And they go and open the crate, and inside is literally Nicholas Pogg's body with a shuriken in the eye. If you remember, I think shurikens were used by the other one, or at least some sort of ninja tools. Anyway, then we cut back, and it's the grand opening of the Iceberg Casino and Hotel, which I feel like this has already been open for a while. Maybe that was just the Iceberg Lounge, and this is separate. I don't know. Regardless, Bruce makes the point that he is actually, like, he was supposed to be here on a date with Charlotte. So now that he has reason to actually show up here, he's like, oh, Charlotte, I'll be there in just a few minutes. And Charlotte's like, oh, great, let me just freshen up. And they're both doing their own secret thing. And Jill's, of course, walking around. As Bruce gets up there, he sees a boat that doesn't belong. And he's like, all right, cool, I can get up there. And there's this weird reference in the middle here to the events of I, Vampire #5, which featured Batman. Don't get me wrong, it's not out of nowhere. But like, it's just a one-panel drop of Alfred being like, oh, you've got enough to keep me busy, Master Wayne, especially that vampire case we've got going on. It was just weird and out of place. Regardless, because that one scene with the smashed bottle meant nothing, Charlotte's just walking around using a security guard that Jill had. And she enters into a room, and Snakeskin's there, and she stabs Charlotte. And, of course, like, right at that moment, Batman crashes in. And he gets real emotional because Charlotte's just been stabbed. And he starts beating the crap out of Snakeskin. And he lets his emotions get in the way, and they both fall into a trap. And Snakeskin does something. I couldn't tell you what. It seems like it's like an airlock, but it leads into just, like, snow and ice. And Batman's saying, oh, I did this to us. I killed us. But I don't know what's happening. I have no clue. So, yeah, he feels bad that he got emotional and blah, blah, blah. I didn't like this issue at all, mainly because from where we left off, there was a guy who stole a bunch of money. There was Charlotte breaking into the Iceberg Lounge, and then 3 enforcers coming to, like, take her out via the Penguin. None of that comes back. Like, not in any, like, straightforward manner. I'm sure all of this is part of the same arc, considering that it's still revolving around the Penguin thing. But, like, this is a completely fresh start from that other stuff. The only thing that carried over was the Charlotte thing. And even that was, like, you could have just taken 3 seconds to set that up of, oh, I broke into the Iceberg Lounge and I'm doing this stuff. So, like, who are the enforcers? Why didn't we see them again? Why is this just completely separate from everything else? This was really disorienting for me to read because I was just trying to figure out, wait, I feel like I missed an issue in here. What's going on? And I didn't. And it's confusing. Anyway, no, art-wise, it's okay. I feel like Snakeskin's kind of stupid looking, just the way they show he changes his face, because, like, he just gets punched, and then it's just, like, a totally different face under there, but supposedly it is actually, like, his skin. So, I don't know. I don't get it. I'm going to give this one a 5.5, mainly because it just feels so disjointed, and, like, this isn't even... Like, he goes through a little bit of the actual detective stuff for a second that this book has been mostly built off of, but then he just drops it just as quickly to be like, oh, I'm just going to go to this place now because I don't have any other leads. So, yeah, 5.5 for this. Whatever. Batwing number 6, written by Judd, Winick, art by Ben Oliver. We left off last issue with the Citadel being destroyed by Massacre and a bunch of guys that he hired. And Batwing gets his hands on one of those guys, manages to trace a call back to Massacre, and finds him in Giza, Egypt. And that's where Batwing says this will all end. This issue picks up 3 years ago, flashback to David's time in the police. We see his partner walking away from some shady-looking guys, and he's like, there's nothing to worry about over here. And David's like, are you sure about that? Because those guys were driving on the wrong side of the road. They killed a family, and I'm pretty sure I see the local warlord's tattoo on them. And he's like, nope, they said they were good. I trust them. And as David presses it more, we see that his partner had taken a bribe to basically be corrupt and look the other way. So David goes back, he talks to Matsu. And he's like, what good is it being a good person if all the good people are also bad? Like, how am I supposed to fight corruption on the side of the angels here? And basically he comes down and he's like, all right, but I'm going to stay morally good, but I'm not going to play by the rules anymore. And so that's where he starts making his own little pact against evil. Then we cut to today, Giza, Egypt, and for some reason that I triple checked, Bruce Wayne, Cone, all the VIPs from the Citadel are now here in Egypt on a bus. I have no idea why they're here, why they would voluntarily come, because Massacre didn't drive them. They're here now. Okay. So he's threatening them and saying, like, the kingdom, it failed, and you are also a failure, Cone. And Cone's like, I'm not the kind of hero you think I am. That's not what I did. And he's like, oh, yeah, no. I know that you were like the wealthy face and the scientist in the background. Not a real hero. But you were also, Steelback the Man Machine, which was basically just Iron Man of the group with all of his flashy toys. And Masker's like, so you're also going to die. So as he's about to do that, he looks up in the sky. He sees Batwing soaring in this, what I can only describe as action figure suit of just able to fly at supersonic speeds, I guess. But as he has to get out of it, which I guess takes longer than a second, Massacre ushers everybody back onto the bus and, like, seals the doors. So he's like, all right, I'll get to you guys in a minute. I'm going to go fight Batwing now. We get another flashback to 1 year ago. There's some gun deal going on. Tensions are going high because people think they're going to be ripped off or whatever. But then they smell something. And then David jumps out in like a mask and military gear. And he's like, I set fire to your truck. And he starts beating up everybody there. And it's not like killing them. He's still staying morally good. But there's a whole lot of what are definitely brain injuries here. So, So as he's holding one of them, threatening them, he's saying, like, all right, look, I've taken out 4 other groups just tonight. I've hobbled your entire industry. Now you go and tell your boss and warn everybody that knows you that I'm out here and I am going to stop you. And Batman, of course, is just watching nearby. And he's like, oh, you're getting quite the reputation around here. Would you like some help? AKA... Bat identity. And I guess that's where we're supposed to just assume he got it. So then we go back to today, and it's just a fight scene, just a general, rough and tumble battle of philosophies of David being like, oh, life will always triumph over death, and Massacre being like, death will always triumph over life. And then at one point, Massacre shoves his machete through Batwing's wing into a wall. So he's like, all right, so you just got it. You're trapped now. You can't get that out. I'm going to go kill that bus of people. Which I don't know why he thought Batwing was trapped, but he was. And as he's walking away, he says, we honor them all in blood, which triggers a memory for Batwing of his time with General Aoketa, the warlord who trained him. And we see a comparison side by side that, like, they have the same sort of build. They both said the same thing. And Batwing's like, geez, is this the same guy? Am I having to face my past right now? That sucks. So he dislodges the wing, like he could just detach it the whole time. And as Massacre reaches the bus, he gets sprayed by Batwing by a stream of gasoline, I can only presume, that comes out of Batwing's suit. And then Batwing ignites it and sets Massacre on fire. And as Batwing's telling everybody, hey, get out of the bus, he's on fire, Massacre shoves his knife into the bus's gas tank and then uses his own like body to light it on fire, and then just gets away. He manages to get away. We see that the door is jammed, so Batwing has to run over there, unlatch the door, and get everybody out. But as he looks around, Massacre's nowhere to be found. So later on, they're talking to Cone in Batwing's lair, and they're basically trying to figure out, okay, so he's still out there, and he's still going to be aiming to kill you guys. What's going on here? And basically, we don't get any straight answers, but it's left to interpretation that, like, Massacre believes that when the kingdom left, like, the African people to fend for themselves, they did more harm than they ever did good, because they were, like, the people had become so reliant on them. I think that's what they get out of it. Anyway, we see him saying that, look, the identities have always been kept secret. Nobody should know who we are, but, you know, a bunch of us have ended up dying. Out of the people who are left, there are, I think they said 3 of them who are still alive, not counting Cone himself. One of them was, like, a straight up, like, goddess, like an actual goddess, so she just left, so she's not a problem. She's never going to be found. But the other 2 are actually in America, and not only America, they are in Gotham City. So Batman and Batwing are both there, and they're like, well, that works for us. And we see that they will have plenty of backup because Nightwing and Robin are both there. They're literally perching. They're just on a gargoyle staring down the rain. So yeah, that's the end of this trade, at least. I like it. I really do. The art is, as always, fantastic. There was that one issue that was a little bit off in the middle, but that was just fill-in artists. I really like the way it looks. As for whatever it's trying to say, it doesn't feel like it's done with it. Like, this doesn't feel like the end of an arc. This just feels like the end of the first act, or maybe a halfway point where it's like, okay, we've had a minor victory here, but we've only just realized who the villain truly is, and therefore we've still got a long way to go in it. And as such, I feel weird judging this on like a whole arc basis. But for this particular issue, I think it was very well done. I think it did a good job demonstrating everything it needed to in terms of the balance. I do have the big complaint of why in the hell are they here? Because literally on the last page of the last issue, Batman had Cone and they were not on a bus. So how did they get to Egypt? Why would they go to Egypt of their own volition? And if it wasn't of their own volition, how did they get there? Minor plot holes. But overall, I'm going to give this one a 7. I think it's very well done, and I am definitely looking forward to seeing what comes in the next 6 issues. Action Comics number 6, written by Grant Morrison, art by Andy Kubert. We left off last issue with the story of a rocket, and then it just evolved into this whole thing of time travel and the anti-Superman army, and they stole the engine, and then the Legion of Superheroes showed up along with future Superman. Because let's get super complicated in issue 5, why not? Issue 6 picks up with a guy, a little diminutive man, who actually appeared all the way back in issue 1. He's back again. And he's just making a deal saying like, oh, yes, this box contains all the different types of kryptonite you would ever need, all the exotic types as well that could take down Superman. And I offer it to you, the anti-Superman army. And we see that inside the box was the engine that those same guys literally just stole. And they realize that too. So they're like, wait a minute, we just stole that. Why are you offering it back to us? And they all want to like kick his ass, but he's just like, well, here's the thing. I'm offering each of you a bit of kryptonite, and I just need each of you to perform one small task in my name. We don't learn his name, by the way. So it really doesn't, I still don't understand why they don't kick his ass. But regardless, the Legion is trying to figure out how to save the ship, because I guess if the ship doesn't have its engine, it'll like explode and kill everybody or something. And so hold on. When the ship dies, the collector AI will reinfect this station, aka the ship that this ship is on, and Earth's entire computer network. So that's a bad thing to have happen. So they need a battery in order to get it all going again. There's Cosmic Man, Saturn Woman. I don't think they actually ever call it that. And then Lightning Guy. Anyway, they have a battery, just like a tiny little AA battery, and Lightning Man says, all right, that should be enough. We can hopefully get it to work. Oh, sorry, no, that's not for the rocket. That's for the time bubble, because the time bubble also got damaged or something. So they use that to power up the time bubble, but then as they're ready to do that, we see these tentacles all writhing around the ship, and it turns out it's a guy named Eric that I guess Superman helped at one point, and he's a shapeshifter, and he becomes all these crazy things. His other name is Drekken, and he's just this huge giant like space squid, and he's trying to take out Superman. Superman just like straight up punches him, rips out like what appears to be a little green man out of Drekken's body, and he's just like, if you know anything, Drekken, you better talk now, or I'm going to punch the teeth out of you. And Drekken's like, oh, you're evil, Superman, you're a bad guy. But then Saturn Woman's like, oh, you made him think about where the engine went, so now I have the location, and you're not going to like it. But then Drekken turns into a T-Rex. Lightning Man and Superman team up to beat him, and he turns back into like this small, diminutive man, and then a tiny little monkey. And then I guess Saturn Girl didn't get the location because she needs a psychic key from Mr. Drekken. Okay, regardless, they get it. They know where it is. And apparently the location of the kryptonite and this entire group of anti-Superman army are inside of Superman's brain. There's an itty-bitty microscopic lead pellet, and they all shrunk down and went in there. So yeah, then we get a flashback to Superboy when he's young. He's wearing his cape and he's wrestling a bull to the ground because it got loose. And he's basically just talking to his Pa Kent, and he's like, Pa, what if my parents who sent me out to space, what if they come back for me? And Pa's like, I mean, that would be great, but, you know, you're always going to be our son. And he's like, well, would you come with me, Pa? He's like, I don't think we're meant for space, but whenever that happens, you will know what to do. And, you know, it's just a thing of, believe in yourself, and the future will work itself out for you. And then that night, he's sitting in a tree, just using his heat vision to shoot cans off of a rock. And the Legion of Superheroes come up, and they're like, I'm really unimpressed. This is supposed to be Superman? Psh, he's just a kid. He looks like a monkey. But then they show that they give him the flight ring, and they have a good time. So then we get back to now, and they're doing some more sensing to figure out that the pellet is inside of his brain. And apparently that whole flashback was actually like a memory they were recalling. And if you paid attention, apparently the barn changes several times from blue to red and back again. And that's how you know that something is wrong. So they hop into the time bubble, and they're like, well, I can already sense that we're inside of your brain, so our future selves are already in there. So we'll just go back a little bit. We'll show up in there, and then we'll be back out in no time because our future selves are in there now. Makes sense? Okay. So they go into his brain, and we see that the weapons deal is still going on, and there are the Sisterhood of Abiding Hate, which literally just look like people from Squid Game, just here. But apparently they did something wrong, and as such, the guy knows that they're imposters. They get destroyed, but then once they get destroyed, they are kryptonite men, who I guess are other characters I'm supposed to know. And the Legion revealed that they were putting their own disguise onto them so that they could be... It's stupid. So anyway, a fight breaks out, and the diminutive guy says, all right, break the engine, flood his brain with raw kryptonite, and it just explodes everywhere. And the Legion's like, oh, we might have messed up. So then we cut back out to Superman, and he does not look good. He is literally dying. And as he's fallen to the ground and the rocket is about to explode because it's running out of power, Drekken turns back into a giant slime monster that we saw from last issue. And he's trying to smother Superman, telling him to give up. We have one panel flashing back to the death of Pa Kent saying, oh, never give up, be a champion for the downtrodden. And so Superman figures it out and uses, because he is flooded with kryptonite radiation from the engine, he puts his hand into the engine compartment of the rocket ship, which powers it up enough that it can take out Drekken and it won't explode now. So then the Legion get back out there. They have enough of a piece of the engine that it can power the ship and keep it safe. And they're like, all right, Superman needs some rest because he's, he just got dosed with kryptonite in his brain. But then they talk about like, oh, do you remember when we first met him? We thought he was so disappointing, but then we had a really good time. The end, as they show Superboy flying with the Legion superheroes. Why did we do this? We were doing a thing about Metropolis being shrunk into a bottle, and like the Collector AI, which we mention in here. Why did we just take 2 issues to do something completely different before we were done with that? I don't understand. I really don't. It wasn't a terrible story, but dear Lord, it is so seeped in. This is not a reboot book. This is, you need to know everything. You have to know, who are the anti-Superman gang? Who's the K-Men? Who's the Sisterhood of... I don't know. I don't care. Grant Morrison does, though. Oh, boy. Okay, so drawing-wise, it looks great. There's no real problem in that. Plot-wise, I could at least follow it, which is leagues ahead of any other Legion of Superhero book. But, like, it feels so unnecessary to have this here. We literally interrupted an arc for something that I don't think is going to further the other arc at all. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one like a 6, and a lot of that is carried by the art. So, what are we doing here, man? Red Lanterns number 6, written by Peter Milligan, art by Ed Benes and Diego Bernard. We left off last issue with Atrocitus basically just focusing the Red Lantern group, saying, all right, some people have intelligence now. The main goal of the Red Lanterns currently is to hunt down Krona, wherever he may be. And then we see on Earth a Red Ring approaching as mild-mannered Jack Moore has his brother beaten and killed by the police, and then he becomes a Red Lantern as well. So this issue picks up with Jack. He is still there. He's still adjusting to the fact that his body is changing into a Red Lantern. His first words are, my spine just snapped. And he's like, all right, well, something's going on. I feel like my heart's about to explode. The police are standing there like, oh my God, do we call an ambulance or a fire brigade? Because his hair is just literally on fire. And he flashes back to when he was teased in school for always reading books. Because, of course, kids. And he tries to control his anger the same way he always has, but that rage is still there. And the cops are coming up to him and he's like, now, you just stay where you are and help will be here soon. And he's just like, all right, I just got to tell him to stay away, no problem. And as he opens his mouth to tell him that, his napalm, like, vomit, whatever, sprays all over one cop and just disintegrates him. So then the other 2 cops come in, they start trying to beat him with billy clubs. And he flashes back again to how he got teased a lot. And basically they realize it's not doing anything. They back off a little bit as he walks over to his brother, sees his corpse, then looks back at the cops. And the cops are like, he was resisting arrest. We just tried to restrain him. Topical. So then we see, all right, I've got these words in my head of like basically the Red Lantern oath but he doesn't know what they mean, and he doesn't know the words Red Lantern. So he's like, all right, I don't know what's going on. But other cops and backup show up. They all start unloading on him, and it's not doing anything. So he's like, all right, I think I've got to go figure out what's going on. So he just takes off trying to figure out who he is. So despite the fact the last issue left off exactly where Atrocitus was like totally in control of everything going on, this issue picks up with him strangling Bleez. Just like, how dare you think that you could do better than me? And he's like beating the crap out of her. And as he throws her away, he turns back to the rest of the Red Lanterns and he's like, all right, so here's what we're going to do, guys. And then he gets tackled from behind by Bleez. And she's like, it used to be one throw like that would have knocked me out, like, for good. But you're getting old, Atrocitus. You're losing your vigor. And the rest of the Red Lanterns are like, oh, boy, who's going to win? Who's going to win? But we see Atrocitus, again, just like throw her into the ground, drag her through the stones. And as it looks like he's about to lay a finishing blow, I think it's Scalix steps forward and he's like, all right, Atrocitus, hey, you punched her enough, man. Just let it go. And he looks around and he sees that there are other people who seemingly would support Bleez, like who are very anxious to see if he would have just finished her off there and maybe would have done something about it. But he tosses Bleez aside, and then he starts like justifying himself. He's like, you question me, without me you'd all still be victims, blah blah blah. And then as he realizes what he's doing, he's like, why do I have to explain myself? I'm Atrocitus. Screw all of you. But he realizes that something has changed as he looks over to Bleez, that Bleez has done something to his core in her being intelligent. So then we cut back to Earth, and it's a graveyard. Some people are there visiting a grave, and they're like, Mommy, what's that in the sky? And we see Jack just come in, crash lands, and makes this huge crater with a bunch of displaced corpses now in the middle of this graveyard. But he gets up, and he looks, and he finds his grandfather's grave. And he cries. He starts freaking out a little bit because his flashbacks to his brother telling him that a guy named Baxter is the one who killed his grandfather. And that name just rings in his head, and he's like, Baxter, rage, Baxter. And he picks up the tombstone of his grandfather and just starts flying away with it. We cut to Baxter in the back of a police car, who's currently getting in like police custody for protection because they realize that Jack Moore's probably out to kill this guy. Like, it makes a lot of sense. And the police are like, don't worry, Jack couldn't hurt anybody. I'm sure you're safe. And then we see Jack just flying to the side of the car. And he also blames Baxter for the death of his brother as well, by relation of the fact that his brother was only getting revenge for the grandfather. Regardless, he gets Baxter. A cop tries to intervene with a taser. Of course, it does nothing. And as he stands over top of Baxter, Baxter's like, you don't understand. I had a rough childhood, and it's not my fault that I'm the way I am. And Jack in his head is like, oh, okay. All of a sudden, my rage makes sense. I understand it now. And he plunges the tombstone down with a crash noise on Baxter's head. But we see that it was protected by Guy Gardner, who shows up and is like, hey, buddy, you and me got some talking to do. And that's where we leave off on the issue. I like it. I like it right now. I think I would prefer focusing more on the, like, Atrocitus side. And when I say that, I mean I want there to be more furthering of the plot they were setting up with, like, the Krona and all that. Because, like, there's only so many issues that Atrocitus can toss Bleez around, and I'm going to care. Like, yeah, she's duplicitous and possibly scheming. We get it. We understand. Please further the plot there. On the other side of that, the Jack Moore stuff, I think it was a bit too slow-paced in the beginning in terms of getting to this point, but now that we're exploring it and we're just moving quickly through it of him hitting all the beats he needs to, I'm fine with it. I think that particular plot probably could have gone back in like issue 2 or 3, and I would have been much more fine with it. But I get wanting to develop the Red Lanterns that have already been established before you introduce this new one. So yeah, no, overall, I think I'm going to give this one I'm going to give it a 7. I think that it's I think the art is pretty good overall. There are some weirdnesses to Jack just because of the way his flame hair works. Like, it frames his face kind of weird at times. But all the Red Lanterns look great, and most of Jack looks great as well. So, yeah, no, 7. I'm down with it, and there's one more issue in this trade. So, Guy Gardner making an appearance to save the day? Question mark. Green Arrow, number 6, written by Keith Giffen and Dan Jurgens, art by Ignacio Calero. We left off last issue with Ollie fighting a big toxic man named Midas. He manages to get the one-up on him, but then Blood Rose, Midas's main squeeze, gets the drop on Ollie and has a gun pointed at his head. This issue picks up exactly there, and Oliver has literally no way out of it. He has no way to get around this gun pointed right at his temple. And basically Oliver's kind of provoking her into doing something. He keeps on like smart talking, and as Midas is starting to come to, Blood Rose just shoots him straight up in the side of the head. And we see blood, and we see him fall, and everybody gasps. But then Midas points out, oh, you didn't shoot to kill him, just wound him. And I don't know if they know how guns against temples work, but that's not... No. Regardless, Blood Rose was like, oh, I don't want the superhero community coming after us because we killed one of their own, so I will only wound him for now. But my dearest, why did you come for me? And, it's just the whole thing of, oh, they care about each other and they're doing these things out of revenge or whatever, and blah, 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 blah. So then we see, of course, Ollie didn't actually die because they straight up told us that, and he's back getting some medical attention from his friends. And they basically ask whether or not he's a part of the superhero community, and he's like, not really, though I did kind of talk to Aquaman once, if that counts. And then it was revealed that Oliver, again, he didn't have a plan for that. He was just kind of going with it, but he logics that, 9 times out of 10, once they start talking a lot, which she was doing, they don't actually want to kill you. They're just trying to waste some time. Which leaves the point that 1 out of 10 times that's not the case, but he doesn't want to think about that. Regardless, the one assistant says how the scanners that are inside their goggles pointed out that Blood Rose doesn't come up with any sort of humanity traits at all, and they reasoned out that she's some sort of android or robot or whatever, so they're able to track her energy signature that they picked up during the fight. So Oliver gets geared back up, and we cut over to Midas and Blood Rose, who are basically just talking about how they need to bide their time a little bit because of Midas's rash attack on Green Arrow. So then we get this real quick glimpse to what I think is Blood Rose's background, where he may have been a girlfriend to Oliver Queen at one point, but now he doesn't even remember her, I think. I don't know. Regardless, the container that they're in down by the dock, explodes. Green Arrow standing outside, and it's just like, hey guys, we tracked your energy signature, so I'm here to take you guys out for good. And welcome to the extended fight scene. Oliver fires a goop arrow to take care of Midas so he doesn't get involved in the fight real quick. It's arrows versus guns between Blood Rose and Ollie. He fires off an electric arrow, which is he's trying to short circuit her. That causes Midas to be able to break out of his goop. He squeezes Green Arrow as hard as he can. And then Oliver puts some sort of special acid thing inside of his leg, inside of Midas's leg. I don't know. The way they're wording it is 2 words, personal hygiene, which maybe it's actually just soap. Regardless, apparently the assistants had a side bet off of that, and they were happy to see that it worked. So They realize, okay, he's getting dangerous. We need to take out the Archer for real. Oliver Queen can wait. And then an arrow comes down. Blood Rose dives on top of it so it doesn't get onto Midas. We see him standing on top of a shipping container, and he's like, if you surrender now, it'll stop, because I got plenty more where that comes from. And then she just leaps in the air, starts firing off shots. And we see that she walked right into Green Arrow's trap of just this massive fiery explosion that just completely disintegrates her. Midas goes walking around, starts smashing things, trying to find Green Arrow. And he steps up behind him and is just like, hey, I got the skull of your girlfriend here. And he's like, all right, well, this fight is over. I'm done. I'm out. And he's like, oh, no, I'll be judge of that. And he's like, no, you're not. And he sets off a self-destruct thing for their lair. So Oliver hightails it out of there. He got the dramatic dive in front of the explosion. And the people behind the chair are like, what was that? What was going on there? He's like, I don't know, some sort of love story. Whatever. Seems like it's over. So Oliver goes up to a rooftop, and he signs off with his guys. And he's like, well, that was a strange adventure, but I'm glad I made it through it. And he cracks open a beer on top of the roof, and we see that somebody is watching him through some futuristic binoculars, and they're like, oh, this guy, he's absolutely perfect, and he's so cool. So that's something that we're going to lead forward to. And then an epilogue where we see that same exact doc, like, they didn't even move. Midas is stitching together Blood Rose again, and she's just a jumbled mess of robotic parts that can barely spit out a word. And Midas just goes, I love you too, my Blood Rose, I love you too. And that's that. This arc, compared to the first one of, like, the internet celebrities, I appreciate far more. That being said, I still don't like this direction. Like, Green Arrow doesn't feel like he has a thing going on, you know? He's just kind of, he's a superhero strictly for, like, 3 square blocks around his company's building, is the way it feels like. Like, he doesn't have any sort of morality or any sort of personal credence right now. He's just like, oh, there's a bad guy doing bad things. And it's all very easily definable bad things. And I feel like Green Arrow, just from what I know of him outside of the New 52, could stand for a lot more than that. He could actually have principles. And I know going into a reboot, they can do whatever they want with him. But I just feel like there's nothing they're doing with him now. There is no, like, end game in sight for Green Arrow of, here's what we're building to. It's just like, hey, he's just kind of a douche. That's the gist of it. He's just, whether he's inside the costume or out, he's just kind of a dick. Overall, this issue, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 6.5. I don't dislike inherently any of the plot things that they did this issue. The arc as a whole is a bit low, but better than the previous arcs, so all that evens out to about a 6.5. Art-wise, it's fine. It's not great in any way, but it's not terrible. It's just kind of house style and maybe a little bit weaker than that, but that's just my opinion on that. But hey, join us next month as we get into issue number 7, aka the start of the Ann Nocenti run. Justice League International number 6, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Marco Castiello. We left off last issue with pretty much the end of the arc. Paraxis was sent packing, and all the giant robots were seemingly stopped. This issue is the epilogue issue, setting up things to come in the future. It's 4:30 a.m. in DC, and Booster Gold's meeting up with Batman to take care of some threat that Batman could totally handle on his own, and Booster acknowledges that, but he wanted to talk. And basically the entire conversation comes down to, hey, look, regardless of what the UN thinks about your team and whether or not they're going to continue funding you, considering that the last thing wasn't exactly a total success, you're still a leader, Booster, and as such, you can do with this team what you want. Like, you don't need anybody else's permission to do that. The Justice League will be keeping an eye on you, so go ahead and lead. Meanwhile, the entire story of what they're doing in the meantime is that they get a tip that those guys from, like, issue 2 who set fire to the Hall of Justice. They were making a bomb, and they bust in there, and one of the guys presses the button to detonate the bomb, and he's like, oh, we're going out with a bang. And Booster has no time to defuse it, and Batman just tells him to get out, but Booster puts a force field around it and protects everybody, and the guys are arrested. So that's the framing device on that. Then we get to, meanwhile in Peru, Guy Gardner, Ice, and Rocket Red, I believe his name is, are currently dismantling and destroying those giant robots that came out of the ground, making sure they can't do anything else again. And Guy's just bad-mouthing Booster the entire time. He's like, man, he was a real leader. He'd be here right now. But no, he's leaving us for cleanup duty, and he gets to go off and do whatever with Batman. And both Ice and Rocket Red are like, hey, he was, more so Ice, he was on the other 3 robot cleanups. He's been with us this whole time. He's our leader. He has to do stuff sometimes. And Ice just gets into it with Guy a little bit of telling him, like, hey, just chill. Booster's doing a good job. Don't know why you hate him so much, but he's doing fine. And Guy kind of hits on Ice a little bit, and Rocket Red gets in the middle for a second, and Guy's just like, hey, how about you get out of here? So Rocket goes into the robot and tries to, like, get some tech from it, because his whole thing is just tech-based. He doesn't have any superpowers. But when he goes inside the robot, he comes across this dangling piece that, like, gives some sort of light into his eyes, is the best way I can describe it. Looks like a mind scan, brain wipe sort of deal. But Guy calls for him, and he's like, hey, I'm about to destroy that part. You're lucky I saw you go in there. What took you so long anyway? He's like, I was working, I think. So he has no memory of what that was, and I'm sure it'll come up soon. Meanwhile, in New York, outside the United Nations, General whatever in August, God, I can never remember his name. The Chinese representative is with Godiva. And Godiva's like, you've never had a hot dog? Well, please, you have to have a hot dog. And basically is trying to ingrain him in the culture, because he's always been very much an outsider, I guess. And we get a little bit of his backstory, that he was a respected military guy who encountered shape-shifting monsters, and they biologically changed him forever. So, yeah. Anyway, he then starts asking questions of Godiva. And it was basically like, you're not as extreme right now as you usually are. You usually got a whole big thing going on. And she's like, well, usually I'm not surrounded by giant world-ending events. I'm just a street-level hero. And he's like, right. Also, why do you hit on boosters so much? And she's just like, okay, well, that's a bit personal. We don't need to talk about that. But as they're talking, a truck comes ramming into, like, the seating area where everybody is. And General realizes that it's an attack. He just tears off his trench coat and shirt for seemingly no reason, and stops the van with his body. And the guy that flies out through the front window is like, I got a bomb. You'll never disarm it. And we see this giant bomb in the back of the van. And it goes off in like 20 seconds. There's no way to just completely destroy it. So then Godiva uses her hair to, like, creep inside of it. And she feels 2 wires inside. And she's like, well, one of them will disconnect the bomb. Which one? And General's like, you can do it. I believe in you. And she yanks off one of the wires, and it stops at 2 seconds. And they're so happy because she's stronger than she thinks she is. So then we go inside the UN building, and everyone's there, including the guys who, like, built the team, Briggs and his assistant. And Booster, Fire, and Vixen are there to, like, represent the team. And basically they are immediately torn into, and they're just like, okay, so here's the deal. Your team didn't really do that well, and you kind of caused a lot of damage, so why should we keep funding you? And Booster gives this nice little speech of him being like, look, we were, like, only together for, like, 5 minutes before we were thrown into this world-ending event. We don't really know each other's powers, but with time we'll get there and we'll be able to do this stuff. Plus, that was supposed to be a rescue mission. And they're like, well, you should be able to expect the unexpected, right? And he's like, right, but we weren't a team yet. We didn't have our stuff. And he's like, well, that wouldn't be a problem for Superman's Justice League. He's like, well, you don't have Superman's Justice League because they are independent. And regardless of what you say here, we're going to be doing our own thing too. So what do you think about that? And immediately, like, one guy is like, no, are you kidding me? That's not how... Never. The other guy is like, I like your spunk. Yeah, I vote yes. And of course, it's a panel of 3, so that just leaves it to the Senator Chairwoman Bao, I believe her name is. And of course, the general storms in. He's like, wait, before you vote, hear me out. Me and you share a culture, and I learned a lot about this team, and I would like to continue it, and we have potential. So please vote yes. And of course, she votes yes. So weeks later, there's this big reveal for everybody, or all the press, I should say. And Briggs is there saying, like, oh, we're here to restore faith in not only the UN, but the governments of the world and the people who we tasked to defend it. And so they reveal the JLI, and they're like, haha, yeah, we're here to save the world. I hope that everybody enjoys us. And guys like, you know what? I think this could be a pretty good team. And Pooster's like, are you kidding? This is the best day ever. And then they blow up. The whole stage blows up. There's just everyone is just underneath rubble. And we see that there were some people who were watching them, and they just were like, haha, they think they've stopped us, but they barely begun. The JLI are dead and buried. And that's where the trade ends. So that's one hell of an ending for a trade. I'm not sure how much I really care for the epilogue. Like, it just feels like house cleaning. It just feels like, okay, we're just wasting one issue to just set up, okay, here's the next place we're going with it. We are officially sanctioning them as a team, despite the fact it feels like they were still officially sanctioned. I don't know. It just feels like, okay, we're just going to pad this out for the sake of the trade right now. It just needs to have a minimum of 6 issues. But it was good. It wasn't bad in any regard. So overall, I would give this one maybe I give it a 7. I think it's fine. I think it's not. It's more so just tiny little character beats. It's just looking more at the characters and their interactions and how they think about things in their own little private bubbles rather than during these big, massive events. So yeah, 7 for this one. And we'll check out the next trade next month. Men of War number 6, written by Ivan Brandon, art by Tom Derenick. We left off last issue with the Easy Company being taken prisoner by this group of soldiers who seemingly cannot die, or at least immortal in some way. In the end, Sergeant Rock manages to get out of his bindings and gets the upper hand. Easiest way to say it. This issue picks up. He's calling into the army base, and he's basically informing a general, hey, here's all the stuff that's happened over the past 3 issues. What are you going to do to help us? And the general's like, dude, I can't do anything. You left the chain of command. Therefore, you are an independent. You are on your own. I can't send in anybody to help you. And Rock basically makes this case that we are a group of 6 Americans, hopelessly outpowered by some other entity that's not even human. We don't know what we're even after here, like what the goal was. You got to give us something to work with. Otherwise, you're going to have 6 dead Americans behind lines, and they will find a way to use that against you. So the general tells him, look, the guy's name, if this is who we're thinking of, is Prior Hurst. And they don't know pretty much anything about him, but they know that he's working for somebody, and they're paying him to arm the locals. So the place that they're at is an armory. It is a giant storage of ammunition. And the general, he takes a second after Rock makes more of his case, and he's like, all right, look, if you can tag the building, if you can make it obvious which building you're in from the air, I can have air support there in 10 minutes. And Rock's like, you have people just 10 minutes away? Are you kidding me? He's like, don't give me crap right now. You got 10 minutes. So he takes the guy who was beating the crap out of him last issue. I think he fought in the Napoleonic Wars. And he basically holds him hostage in front of Hurst. And he's like, okay, so here's the deal. You're going to let my guys out or I'm going to shoot your guy. And Hurst is like, okay, yeah, this is my fault. I get it. Anyway, and he shoots the Napoleonic guy. And then we just get into a gunfight between Hurst and Rock, with Hurst not moving like an inch. He's just standing there, and the bolts are just missing him. And he keeps firing off at Rock. He gets like a little clip in the shoulder, and then a more powerful one shortly thereafter. But Rock manages to land 3 hits dead center in his chest, one of them hitting his heart. But all it does is just knock the breath out of him for a second, but then he's right back up again. And he's like, Rock, you don't understand. war is old, and I am very good at it because of how old I am. And other soldiers, when they lose blood, they die. But me, I never run out. So he makes Rock the deal. Look, I just lost one of my men. I can give you that same level of immortality. I can give you a long life as a warrior. And Rock's just like, this isn't war. That's not what war is. And he's like, war? You don't know anything about war. You don't, like, I've seen wars. I've lived through them all. There's nothing that I don't know about it. So, as Rock is sitting there, he's like, no, I'm not going to join you, defiantly. And Hurst just looks disappointed, but then he points his gun at Rock. But before he shoots, Rock yells over to Corporal Korba and tells him, whatever happens, Korba is to take command upon his death. So before Hurst shoots Rock, he walks over to Korba and be like, well, then I guess I'll take care of you, just to show him how futile this is. And Korba lets out that red power energy that he showed off in the other issue. And Hurst genuinely didn't see that coming. And it's a big enough blast that it does actually tag the building simultaneously. So the Air Force, the jets, whatever you want to call it, come flying in, screaming overhead the building. The Easy Company, they all escape. They actually bring out their captors with them. Nobody dies that day, as much as they can help it. And the ammunition storage depot is completely obliterated by these jets. So they get Hurst tied up, and one of the guys, the guy with the scar on his face, the gravedigger from last issue, Rock wakes him up and he's like, yeah, so basically I figured out what you guys were doing. You were just hired to guard over this place. That's all that you were doing this entire time. I don't know how he came to that conclusion, but he says he did. So now that the depot is destroyed, the soldiers have no reason to go after Sergeant Rock and his guys anymore. It's done. They're soldiers. They were given their orders. Now their mission has failed, so they just go back home. And the gravedigger asks for Sergeant Rock's name, and he gives it. And he's like, I used to serve with the Sergeant Rock in a war a long time ago. Makes me feel young to know you're still out there. And as Rock walks away, leaving the soldiers tied up because they don't want to deal with them anymore, the gravedigger yells out, like, you're not alone out there. There were always other teams. I was one of them. This thing was as old before I was born, so watch your back. And that's where it leads off, with a full-on the end. And I've paged through the following issues in this, and I think we're done with Sergeant Rock. So overall, I really enjoyed this arc. I think it was a fantastic just story to tell. They told it very well throughout. It was not overladen with dialogue, because it wouldn't make sense. Like, with all the fighting, there wouldn't be that much talking. This isn't a superhero fight with just sharing your master plan as you punch each other. This is straight war, and I really like the way it's represented here. Art-wise, it's been fantastic throughout. I think it's always been Tom Derenick. I'm not sure if there's ever been an issue without him, but he does a great job with just, without any sort of caption boxes or anything describing what's happening. He just straight up he shows you what happens. Like, this would probably flow just as well for half the action sequences with zero caption or text boxes at all. So overall, the arc as a whole, I give a very high rating to. But this particular issue, I'm going to give a 7.5. The only things that are knocking it down is it just doesn't feel like a completely satisfying ending for Rock as a whole. And if this were continuing, if we do get more of a story, then that's fine. That's entirely fine. But with a big old the end there, I'm going to go ahead and say this is it. So I wish that it was a bit more satisfying in like how we were handling Rock, like wrapping up this story. But as it ends, it's good. It's a good story overall, and I would definitely recommend checking it out for at least those 6 issues. All the backups that I have yet to cover, and the last 2 issues of the series coming up, we'll see if that still manages to stick the landing. But the Sergeant Rock story that makes up the majority, definitely worth the read. O.M.A.C. number 6, written by Dan DiDio and Keith Giffen's, art by Scott Kolins. We left off last issue with a crossover with Frankenstein, and at the very end, the reveal that one of the Checkmate's senior scientists named Mokari is prepping something called the Zero Patient, which will allow him to take over Checkmate. This issue picks up with Kevin Coe being awakened from a nightmare by Brother Eye, and apparently he was doing research throughout the night trying to figure out what in the hell is going on in Cadmus Labs. And Kevin's like, well, yeah, clearly, because they've been doing crap to my life constantly. And Brother Eye's like, yeah, well, you also seem to look up a bit of my history, so what's that about? And Kevin's like, can't hear you, late for work, bye. But obviously he's still being followed by Brother Eye, so Brother Eye's like, maybe you should leave that alone. And Kevin's like, how about you go spy on someone else? And he's like, okay. So we cut over to Checkmate headquarters, and he starts talking to Maxwell Lord, Brother Eye, and he's like, hey, Max, so I was looking through some of your secret server file things on your network because that's just something I can do, and I noticed something called Zero Patient, which seems like it could be a huge threat to you. I assume you know something about this, right? And Maxwell Lord's like, of course I do. Of course I know all about it, so much more than you do. He's like, cool. So, just wanted to gauge that. Okay, see ya. And as soon as the call ends, Maxwell Lord calls up McCarty and is like, dude, what the hell is Zero Patient? What are you doing down there? Because I swear to God, if you're going to screw me over, I am going to kill you. And McCarty's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm definitely not doing anything evil. Okay, I got to go, though. Bye. And then we see he's totally doing that evil thing. So we cut back to Kevin. He's doing his job, whatever that may be. And he's approached by Tony, because I have to try to remember that character's name, who's like, hey, so you remember that hot lady who came in, I think last issue, and was like trying to fire you? Well, I managed to score a date with her, but you'll only come if we double date together. So what do you say? And he's like, I guess I could talk to Jody. She's still kind of pissed off at me. So he goes over to Jody's cubicle, and she's crying, and it turns out that her cousin June was in a plane crash, and they don't know if she survived. So she's just looking for something to distract her for the moment. She's like, well, we're in luck. Let's go to dinner. So we see Tony calling up the lady, saying that the double date is on, and she's got a fake wig and fake glasses and these weird bird tattoos on her back, and she's like, good, as long as Kevin Coe will be there, I will be there. And Brother Eye's like, hey, this is not good. There's some sort of strange signature, so you better be on guard. And Kevin's like, you better shut up. So they go on the date. The woman is drop dead gorgeous. And they get inside and start talking. They're like, so, how long have you been in financial consultant? She's like, oh, no, I'm not really a financial consultant. See, I just came into Cadmus to find something that belonged to my family, and I believe that Kevin knows where it is. And Kevin's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then she freaks out on a waiter who came up to give him the wine list and starts demanding the mother box be handed over to her. And, of course, Brother Eye pops in and is just like, oh, hey, I think she's the energy signature, as she starts glowing. And Kevin's like, yeah, probably. So she unleashes her energy. Kevin O.M.A.C activates, and we see that she is part of the Furies from Apocalypse. She's sent here to get the mother box back that belongs to her family, or like Granny Goodness or whatever, which she just name drops the whole way through. And Brother Eye specifically says, like, okay, so here's the thing. I don't know who she is, like, specifically, but the mother box is kind of what I use to make us, and there's no way I'm giving that back. So time to fight her. So just an extended fight scene. Turns out that her whip uses the same sort of energy because it's all mother box based. So Kevin's able to use it to redirect the energy back into her and electrify her. We see Jody got knocked out in, like, the initial explosion, and Tony's just kind of being, like, he's being a decent guy, but he's also, like, hitting on her. Just like, oh, don't worry, baby, I'm here. While she's unconscious, I don't know how to take it. Anyway, we see the bird tattoos on her back fly off and start attacking Kevin, and they're literally draining him of his very essence because they are made of, like, anti-life, and therefore can drain the life out of him. And as they seemingly are getting the upper hand on him, Brother Eye's like, okay, I got something that might be able to help, but it's super risky. Ready? Here we go. And Brother Eye sends down a beam of energy from his satellite, lands on O.M.A.C, and he just slaps the birds out of existence, which basically knocks the woman out as well, because I guess they were life-linked or something like that. And as O.M.A.C is about to end this and kill her, she uses something to teleport out, and she's gone just as easily as she came in. But she will be back, and she will have her Furies by her side. So then we see it's later on, nobody died. Everyone's just wondering what happened, and Jody's like, man, where was Kevin? He just disappeared during all that. I guess he has secrets he'll never tell anyone, not even me. And then we cut back to Checkmate headquarters. Maxwell Lord is just sitting in a chair, looking at some stuff on the computer, and he tells an assassin to stop, which he does, and then he calls out to Brother Eye. He's like, are you kidding me? You sent an assassin? I thought you would be more creative. And Brother Eye's like, I don't got to be creative. I was just trying to see if you would be able to fall for it. Anyway, I need your help protecting mankind. I can do that, but you need to stop being in my way with your mind control powers. You got to get out. Got it? And he's like, okay, how about this instead? I'm going to come after you, and I'm going to take you out of the picture. And he tells the assassin to kill himself, and the assassin blows his own brains out. And then he vows at that very moment to use the full strength of Checkmate to take out Brother Eye. And that's it. That's it for the issue. Oddly enough, this says, next issue, Kevin spends a night in the zoo, which is exactly how the previous issue ended. So I'm pretty sure this issue wasn't supposed to be here originally, or maybe they just forgot it was happening. I don't know. It's a strange thing that both issues end that same way. So one thing that I really need to point out is that the art in this issue, I don't know what's different. I think this is the first time Scott Kolins is really doing the art. I think it's been Keith Giffen primarily before this. Oh my God, the art is so much better. I cannot overstate how much better the art looks. It's still in the same sort of style. It's still got some weirdness to it, but everything about it is so much better. It's immediately noticeable. Dear Lord, I didn't know what I was missing. In terms of the writing, honestly, I think this may be one of the better written ones. In terms of it was moving fast, and it pretty much followed the same thing of O.M.A.C gets in a fight, the person gets away, and then Kevin's lonely. But it stayed focused, It wasn't just Brother Eye going on for 15 years about you must O.M.A.ctivate because I am your leader and you must listen to me and blah, 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 blah. I don't care. So this issue is probably the best issue we've had so far, if you don't count the Frankenstein issue that was basically the same. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 7. It's a really low 7, though. I really going to give it a 6.5, but I'm going to bump it up to the 7 because it didn't really do anything that I can oppose. It did good things across the board and average things at worst. So I'm okay with it. I'm really hoping that it can keep it going, but I know not to hold my breath for this series. Stormwatch number 6, written by Paul Cornell, art by Miguel Sepulveda. We left off last issue with Harry Tanner taking projectionist hostage, going out into hyperspace, blowing the big alien horn, and seemingly blowing up the entirety of Stormwatch HQ in hyperspace. So bad thing happening. This issue picks up pretty much right there. Jenny Quantum, whatever they're calling her, she put up a barrier to protect them from the vacuum of space and all of the debris flying around them, but seemingly her eardrums have burst in the process, so she can't hear anything. Martian Manhunter links everybody telepathically. Jack is freaking out because Harry clearly just betrayed all of them, but Engineer takes the reins and is just like, okay, we got to fix this now. What do we do? Because we are dropping out of hyperspace and we're going into actual real space. And so we cut to a military base real quick just to show, hey, sir, there's a giant alien ship that literally just appeared in Earth's orbit out of nowhere. Then we got Midnighter, who's also flying out into the vacuum of space, seemingly nobody to catch him. Cut back to Engineer, and he's like, hey, this ship is technically a city because it has to be for you to live here, Jack. So I need you to talk to the spirit of the city and get it back, together. And so Jack gets into the thing, and he sees this giant Daemonite, who, if you've been following like any other series from the Edge label of the comics, they're in every single one of them. So the Daemonites, it's apparently just a slave inside of this thing, and it wants to attack and or kill Jack. And as it awakens, Martian Manhunter freaks out because of its sheer power. Cut back to Midnighter. He's about to die out in the vacuum of space, but he's like, oh, I'm not going to die struggling because that's just what my enemies want. But then Apollo just grabs him and he's like, hold on, I'm saving you. Then we go back to Jack. He's talking to the ship, the Daemonite inside the ship, and he's like, hey, so here's the thing. You are the AI consciousness that is of this space station, right? And he's like, yeah, because you guys stole it. This was a Daemonite ship, and I was the Daemonite AI, and I was sent here to kill all of you, but you hijacked it and, like, turned me off. He's like, yeah, no, totally, I get that. We were kind of dicks. But you're literally falling apart and will die, and I guarantee you it is not the Daemonite way to just go out for no reason. We see Midnighter and Apollo real quick. Midnighter's just looking up at Apollo. He's like, God, you're so hot. And he's like, I think we're linked telepathically to everyone else. And he's like, let him hear. And as they burst into Jenny Q's quantum force field or whatever, just so they can save Midnighter, it causes Jenny a lot of pain, but they get it. They're all together. So Engineer, like, fires some electricity into Jack's brain to power up his synapses, which allows him to fight the AI, or at least stand on equal footing. And he's like, okay, here's the deal. I know that we were kind of dicks and we shut you down, but you need to keep this place together. So here's what I'm willing to give you. One, we will give you a voice so that you can talk to us on the space station. You can mislead us for all the Daemonite plans or do whatever. You still have to obey us and all the commands we give you, but you can at least speak. Also, I will make it so you can never be shut off again. We got a deal? And he's like, okay, yeah, fine, we got a deal. So immediately the ship's AI just pulls it all back together and saves all their lives. And immediately the engineer's like, all right, pull us back into hyperspace quick. And the ship responds like, as you command, you foul unbeliever. He's like, what the hell do you do, Jack? And Jack's like, I had to make some concessions. We're just going to have a snarky computer AI from now on. So we cut to, they're in the med bay. Jenny's getting her ears checked out, and Midnighter's dealing with the fact that he was literally in the vacuum of space for an extended period of time. But they talk for a second, the engineer and Midnighter. And it's basically like, okay, yeah, so Harry betrayed us, which kind of sucks considering he was deceptive, but I thought he was deceptive for us. But we could really use you on the team. And Midnighter's like, oh, yeah, no, I'm on the team. I want to kick that guy's ass. And if I'm on the team, Apollo's definitely going to be on the team. So Engineer has the backing of Midnighter to be the leader inherently. We see Martian Manhunter and Apollo talking, and he's upset that Harry betrayed them because he was kind of a friend to John and also was a friend of Projectionist who has been taken hostage by Harry. And he makes the offhand comment here that earlier on Apollo said that Martian Manhunter was with the Justice League, but that isn't technically true. Martian Manhunter was a public hero, which is kind of used synonymously, but he never actually joined the League because he would have to keep the secrets of Stormwatch from them, which would inevitably lead to him betraying them. So then we see just a little bit of, hey, is Adam maybe coming back? Because Jack is checking the portal he was sent into. And the ship informs him, like, nah, it transforms anything goes into it and transports it across 1 billion dimensions. Like, he's probably not coming back. So then they have a little team meeting, or at least Engineer calls a team meeting. First we get back to the military base that noticed the ship, and it was like, okay, so now it's gone again. What should we do, sir? And he's like, I want you to train a space laser on that spot at all times. And if it ever comes through again, we fire immediately. Because going into hyperspace is something that we should be able to do. So then we get the team meeting, and basically it just boils down to, all right, so here's how we're going to go. When Jenny comes of age, she'll lead the team, because that's just the way things have always been, is that the child of the century will lead when they get old enough. Jenny's like, I don't care. Then the engineer says, in the meantime, we need another leader, because Projectionist is gone. I would like to volunteer myself. Martian Manhunter's like, I mean, I will support whatever the consensus is. Uh, Midnighter and Apollo both vote for engineer. Jack is abstaining, and he says that if Adam comes back, Adam gets his vote. And everyone's like, hey, all right, sounds good. And if Adam comes back, I'll step aside. But in the meantime, engineer's leader. And apparently Harry stole a map of all these Stormwatch like depots, or security caches, they call them. Some things are very valuable, some things are very dangerous. But now they have to go basically treasure hunting all over the earth to find these things before Harry gets them and uses them to become more powerful. Meanwhile, we get a little epilogue here of they're in hyperspace, Projectionist and Harry. He's still holding her hostage, and he basically asks her whether or not they can find them there. And she's like, no, they can't find us here. But she's picking up on media from another world, and it's all saying something terrible. So before Stormwatch can go after Harry and Projectionist, they're going to have to save the universe first. This is a good book. I really like this. The first issue laid on way too much, way too fast. It was just too much. But for the arc overall, I really do appreciate what they did with it. I think it was very well done in the long term, and it was messing with the stakes overall. Those first 4 issues were kind of focused on one thing, and then the last 2 were kind of on another thing, but it all seemed to flow seamlessly there. So I'm good with that. This particular issue, I like what they did with it. This is the first time I've actually given a crap about a Daemonite being somewhere across any of DC's books, which says something because this is also the last book in like any of these Edge titles that I think doesn't have a Daemonite in it. So yeah, no, I'm gonna give this one a 7.5. And I really just do want to commend this entire book. Miguel Sepulveda has done a great job of blending the digital art and just normal drawings and ink and stuff like that. It's very well done. So art-wise, fantastic. I would like to point out in the back matter for the trade, at least they showed different character, like concept arts. And apparently there was supposed to be a character named Crazy Jane, and she just wasn't in the book. They had to cut it for space, but it's interesting to see the things that could have been. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing where Stormwatch goes from here, because it seems like now that we've got the team established, now that we know all their powers and the way they work together, and we have a clear enemy as well, I feel like it's going to be a lot better in terms of what we're going to get. It's still unpredictable because they're crazy, but predictable more so than that first issue, which just threw me for a loop. So yeah, I like it, long story short. Hawk and Dove number 6, written and art by Rob Liefeld. We left off last issue with the end of an arc that I guarantee you does not matter at all for this one. And this one begins with Hawk leaping over rooftops in Gotham City, and he is being chased after by Blockbuster, a huge meat of a man who could just pretty much destroy anything with just his pecs. Apparently they were after Blockbuster because he stole something, an amulet of some sort, and now Hawk is on the retreat because Blockbuster could literally cave his head in despite his superpowers. But he decides, all right, I'm cornered, time to fight, now or never. So he kicks Blockbuster in the nuts, then goes to punch his face, and he's like, all right, I got it, and then he gets punched in the face himself and is down for the count. And of course Dove comes in, lands a hit of her own, and Hawk makes the point that Dove is actually the stronger one out of the two, which, okay, I suppose. There's no reason that it can't be true. It's just she's the peace and you're the war, whatever. So they team up and they finally are about to take down Blockbuster, but he gets some big power boost because I guess that's just part of what he does. And he gets the amulet that was around Hawk's neck. And as Hawk is about to give chase, he gets wrapped up in a restraining tie thing, and we see the person who did it is Robin, which I gotta say, they don't explicitly say, but they very heavily imply that this is Damian, the current Robin, as Robin, because they say League of Assassins in a minute. He looks 20. He's supposed to be 10. He is definitely at least 20. Maybe that's just Rob Liefeld. Point being, he seems a lot more like Tim Drake than he does Damian. But regardless, Hawk gets out of it. He kicks Robin in the face. And they start battling for a second because they don't know each other. Well, he knows who Robin is, but Robin doesn't know who they are. And then Dove shows up and is like, hey, all right, look, we were chasing after an amulet. You just let it get away. So we're going to go after it some more. And then Robin's like, yeah, that's actually like the 7th thing that was stolen in terms of a bunch of different totems and magical pieces. So I put a tracker on him, and he's going to take us to the Motherlode because there's no way Blockbuster's going to want anything to do with it. He's being used by someone else. And when Dove questions, when you say leads us to the Motherlode, you're not talking about me, you, and Hawk, right? He's like, no, it's me, Batman. And so Batman shows up, and he explains that a villain named Necromancer has been pulling the string this whole time, and it's good that Hawk and Dove are here because they have supernatural elements, so they'll be able to help fight Necromancer with that, I suppose. Hawk and Robin spar verbally for a little bit, and then Batman's like, all right, everyone shut up. We got to go because she'll become more powerful than anything we've ever seen before if she uses those totems. So let's get going. But as long as you're in Gotham, my city, my rules. And Hawk is like, psh, whatever. I don't even care. But then they go off into the night. We see all 4 of them. And Hawk's narrating this entire issue, by the way, and he specifically points out, like, how does a bat and a robin even make any sense? One's a bird and one's a winged rodent. It's stupid. This is stupid. So we cut over to Necromancer. She has the 7 items she needs to apparently become the most supreme sorceress in all the realms. She can access all the dimensions, like the slip and the veil and the green and the red, and she'll rule over them with an iron fist and blah, blah, blah. So then Batman and Hawk come in. They aim for Blockbuster, start to take him out. Dove and Robin go for the Necromancer, and she starts to put up a little bit of a fight. Like, she's got spells that, like, are completing the circle and have these totems floating around her. But then Robin just punches her in the face, and Dove grabs one of the items. And it's like, all right, the spell's over. We did it, guys. Congrats. But then, of course, Blockbuster is now free from whatever spell Necromancer was using. So he's now in just a super blind rage. So Batman and Hawk team up, and they both do super strong punches on the guy, and he takes him out. And Batman butters up Hawk a little bit, being like, are all the avatars of war as powerful as you? And he's like, oh, Batman. So they punch Necromancer a little bit, but then she uses some smoke and gas to escape. And, like, literally none of them have the ability to follow. Like, it's not saying that she teleported out or used magic. Like, she just used a gas bomb, and everyone's like, I can't see. But regardless, Dove is like, we got all the items back. I doubt she's coming back for a while. And we're going to need some help bringing Blockbuster to Arkham, even though I think he's more of just a county jail sort of guy, but whatever. So then Batman's like, look, I'm impressed by your guys' power, but you need to learn to work together better. As long as you can live to show your true power, I believe you'll be more effective than anyone I've ever met. And then they jump off, and that's it. They're going back to Washington, D.C. Honestly, I feel like DC editorial was just like looking down the list of, okay, I think we've gotten pretty much every single comic in the New 52 lineup to cross over with Batman at the, wait a minute, Rob Liefeld, what are you doing over there? You haven't crossed over with Batman yet. And they just made this issue because of course they did. It's fine. There's nothing in it that's like inherently like, oh God, this issue. It's fine. It's just Batman and Hawk and Dove and for some reason age 20 Robin all just teaming up and having a fight. It means nothing. That's honestly in the end it just means nothing. So I'm giving this one a 5.5 just because it means nothing. Like it's slightly better than average being a 5, but it's just perfect filler. This is quite literally, it doesn't further anything at all. It's the exact perfect filler. So, good on it. Static Shock number 6, written and art by Scott McDaniel. Last issue, Sharon, or one of the Sharons, got kidnapped, and Static is on an all-out war now to find out exactly where they were taken. Hardware is going to show up soon to help. This is a really dense issue, and I'm going to move really quickly, but I'm going to try to hit all the points. So, Static finds out that the garbage boat that they have is actually pretty high tech, and they could be anywhere up and down this river now. But as he focuses really hard, he sees some SOS signals, and he follows them down to wherever it may lead, which is south down the river. Meanwhile, south down the river in a submarine near Rikers Island, all the villains are together, and they're going to some super secret place with a lot of big technology, so they need to be on their best behavior, according to Tan, the crime lord. And as they arrive inside this place, it's a giant portal, and everyone's just in awe of it as David Davidson steps up and reveals, this is Darkstar, and I'm the big bad of all of this, which they say that he was the therapist in like issue 3 or something like that. So he's been around, and he's just been pulling the strings from behind and in front and whatever. So he invites Piranha to bring the girl to him. Piranha steps up, and he's like, all right, so are you sure Static is dead? And Piranha's like, yeah, no, totally. And if he's not, we've got like 1,000 lookouts, so we're good. And then Sharon's like, wait a minute, you're the big bad. You're the one who made the clone of me to begin with. Why would you do this to me? And he's like, it wasn't about you. It was about me. You're not nearly as important as you think you are. And Alkali, for some reason, is getting really pissed off over this whole thing. And Guillotine is like, dude, back down. So then Static reaches the end of the trail, or at least the end of the trail he can get to, because it goes underground beyond his reach, and he doesn't know how to get there. And at that moment, Hardware and his sidekick Technique show up. And then we go back down into the portal room, and basically Piranha just asks for an explanation. And apparently if you drop down the center of the portal, you get teleported through space. And if you go through one of the edges, you get teleported through space and time. And he offers up the girl. He says, oh, drop the girl in. If Static's really dead, we don't need her. And Piranha looks at her, and he's like, nah, I'll drop one of my lackeys in. And he drops in the lackey, and David Davidson says it goes to the homeland of his new colleagues, the columnists. Which, okay, that's something. So all of Piranha's lackeys start hooting and hollering, and Davidson doesn't like how rowdy they are. So then Nemo steps up because he's here. Sure, whatever. And he offers up the Q juice to Davidson in exchange for going through the deep portal, because I guess he thinks it'll allow him to live and not be turned into nothingness. So Piranha's like, wait a minute, you said you'd sell me the Q juice. And he's like, I lied, we're not working together. And then Davidson tells Piranha, like, also, you're not working with me either. And then he turns to Nemo saying, and I'm not working with you either, because I've already got my own warriors, and I don't need your Q juice to turn them into freaks. So now everyone's not working with each other. Nemo just throws the Q juice into the portal, which is going to turn all the columnists into freaks, which Davidson doesn't want. And Piranha's like, all right, this went to hell. Everyone start killing each other. And Davidson's like, I agree. So then we get Hardware and Static and Technique, and he's trying to figure out, like, what do I do? How do I follow the signal? And Hardware's like, what about the apps that I gave you inside your suit? And Static's like, I have apps? And he pulls up all these things, and one of them reveals an access hatch, so they open it up and fly down in there. Meanwhile, everyone's fighting. Alkali and Guillotina are trying to protect Sharon as best they can from every superhero here. And Nemo's like, Alkali, please, you have to get me down to that portal, else I'll die. And he's like, dude, I'm going to destroy that portal. I'm not going to save you. And Nemo's like, you can't destroy it. It's 4-dimensional. The only way to destroy it is from the inside. Why did I give you that info? So then Static, Hardware, and Technique show up, and their goal is to get Sharon out, and then they'll deal with everything else. And then something like goes into the central core of the thing, and I genuinely have no idea what it is. I think it might be a guy named Sunspot, but that might just be a nickname that Static gave him. I don't know, but he's there and he's causing problems. So Static gets knocked into the portal, but he like lands on the rim or something like that. But then when he looks up, he sees Alkali, and he's like, oh yeah, I got a bone to pick with you because of previous issues. And meanwhile, Technique is trying to get Sharon to safety, but stuff keeps getting in the way. Static's fighting with Alkali, and then, make a long story short, Alkali's like, dude, do you not understand that the reason I'm trying to save your sister is because I'm you? That's right. When he just went through the portal, he hit the side, which means it was teleported through space and time, and he made a clone that came out earlier in, like, issue 3. Sure. So he does all this revealing. He's like, Dr. Nemo accidentally told me how to destroy the portal. Help me do that. And then whatever's inside the portal is doing its thing. I don't know anymore. And it starts exploding, and then the whole thing starts filling up with water as well. Nemo seemingly gets sucked into the portal, but for some reason he says no. So I guess that's not what he wanted. The Pale Man is just lets go of Piranha's hand and dies. Okay, and Hardware, Technique, Guillotina, Sharon, and Static make it out, and I don't think anybody else, including Alkali. What happened to him? I don't know. So they get out, and Guillotina is offered a chance to become a good guy, and I think that Sharon knows Static's secret, but they don't explicitly say it, so maybe not. Anyway, last page, the family has a vote to stay in New York, even after everything that's happened. The Sharon who was taken on that long trip, the kidnapping and all that, she comes down to the conclusion of, look, I can just go by my middle name. I'll be Cassandra now, and we'll be like sisters, and we won't have to worry about this. And everyone's happy with that. And then they end on a Static panel of them saying, oh, Static, isn't he so cute and so cool and blah, blah, blah. So in issue 1, I was really confused because of the clone sisters thing that didn't get explained at all. We're just expected to know it. And for a reboot, that was really hard to just swallow. We've hit issue 6. We've gotten an explanation as to who did it, how they did it, sort of kind of why they did it. And I still don't feel like I understand anything. More importantly, why did we do all this? This book was so overwritten. This book took 1,000 different threads that it could have just left. It didn't have to do, but it just continued on. People always say that at the New 52, the things that carried on were Batman and Green Lantern, but they never mentioned that Static was the one who just brought every bit of past continuity in with it. And it's infuriating. There is a diagram, an actual, literal, honest-to-God diagram in the back matter of this trade that explains how Nemo and his powers work in relation to the portal, and I still don't get it. This book was so horribly overwritten, and as such, I dock it horribly for not being able to wrap it up in a way that I find satisfying. I understand that's subjective, but that's what this whole show is. Art-wise, it's the same it always has been. It's literally been the same artist throughout, and it looks okay to good. Nothing to write home about, though. So I'm going to give this one a 5.5, and that's really just this issue. If I'm talking about the arc as a whole, it would be a little bit lower because there's just a lot of problems that it did not deal with properly. But this issue, if I'm being fair to it, is a 5.5. And we still have 2 more to go before this series gets canceled, so I don't even know what we're doing for that. Animal Man number 6, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Travel Foreman. For the back half, the front half is actually John Paul Leon. So, last issue we left off on the Red being infected by the rot, everyone hopping in an RV and trying to drive away as fast as possible, and Sock says that the only thing that could save them is Swamp Thing. This issue picks up, it's a movie. It's one of Buddy's movies because he was an actor, and this is one of the ones he starred in. It's a Ryan Derenick film called Tights. And we see a man just getting ready in the morning. He's looking for jobs in the paper. And we see him make his way to a apartment complex. He knocks on the door, and a man opens up named Dave. The guy, I'm just going to call him Chaz, because that's his name. Chaz, played by Buddy, is asking for Paige, and Dave's like, I don't think you should really come in. Besides, Jamie is, and Chaz interrupts, like, he's mine. He's my son, and I'm going to see him whenever I damn well want Dave. Now let me in. So Chaz goes in, and Paige comes up, clearly an ex-wife, and they argue for a little bit. about him just showing up out of the blue. He wants to hang out with his son, Jamie. But Paige points out, like, you haven't given child support in, like, over a year. I haven't heard from you in a month and a half, and you still smell like liquor. And he's like, okay, first off, you don't even need child support with Dave here. And Dave's like, what did I do? He's like, shut up, Dave. Secondly, I've got a job. I've got one lined up at least. It's like a private security thing. And I'm going to be able to do it because, you know, of my history as Red Thunder. So we get this feeling that he was a superhero in the past. And Paige tells him, like, look, you got to get past the superhero thing, Chaz. Like, it was fun when you were in your 20s, but you're not in your 20s, so how about we get over it? And he's like, all right, sure. Either way, I got a job lined up, and I want to see my son. Just for a second. She's like, all right, fine, but next time call. So he goes back to his son's room, where he's playing some video games, knocks on the door. The son is not very interested in seeing his dad, and he's like, hey, son, I'm happy I get to see you. I've just been busy for a while. And he's like, yeah, you know, it's whatever. And he tells him, oh, yeah, I got a new job, and I might be able to get back in action as Red Thunder soon. And his son's like, oh, that's cool. Great. And he offers up this little paper bag that he was bringing this entire time. And inside is a Red Thunder action figure, limited edition. And the son is like, oh, thanks, Dad. That's cool. And he sets it down. He's like, all right, I got to get ready for school. So he says bye to his dad, and the dad leaves. Goes to the place where he's got this private security firm job out of the paper. And the person doing the interview is like, I don't see any previous police work here. What kind of experience do you say you have? And he's like, well, I wasn't exactly in law enforcement, but I was the Red Thunder. She's like, excuse me? He's like, you know, it wasn't like Justice League, but I was a hero. I prevented some local crimes, so I have exactly the experience you're looking for. And then we see cut to him throwing his suit jacket in the trash can and going to a bar. Guy at the bar asks if he wants another, and he says yes, opens up his wallet and says, okay, actually, maybe I'm good. And he goes home, stares at an empty fridge for a while, pulls out a beer, and he sees a picture of Red Thunder, either him or his son in like a Red Thunder Halloween costume. And he goes to his closet and pulls out the old costume, and he's like, all right. So we cut to this newsstand. The guy wants a pack of cigarettes, but he doesn't have ID. And he's like, man, just give me some smokes. And the guy's like, no, you guys always just show up here and don't buy anything. You just mess up my magazines. He's like, I'm trying to buy something, but you won't let me. And as they're giving him some crap, you hear a voice off pan. It's like, the man says he wants you to leave. And it cuts to Chaz in Red Thunder outfit, which just looks like a tracksuit with a big R on it. And the kids just bust out laughing. And Red Thunder tries to keep his composure. He's like, isn't it time you kids got home? It is a school night. And the kids just lay into him. And he's like, man, you look like you're 40 and you reek of booze. And Red Thunder puts his hand on the kid's shoulder. He's like, this is my last warning. And then one of the kids smashes a bottle over Chaz's head. And they just start beating him. We do get one panel in here of buffering. And then we see everything go to black. And when he wakes up, he's got bandages all over his face. He's in the hospital. And nurse is waking him up asking, okay, what do you remember? You took some hard hits and you were out for 16 hours, but there was no internal damage. And the first thing he asks about is, did my costume survive? And he's like, I'm sorry, we had to throw that away. And at that moment, Paige and Jamie show up. And Paige is like, what were you doing? Why were you out there doing that? That was so stupid. And he's like, I thought I told you have to quit this stuff. And Chaz is like, quit? Red Thunder never quits. Right, Jamie? Right, partner? And Jamie just starts crying. And he just tells his dad, like, I want you to stop. I don't want you to get hurt anymore. I want you to stop being Red Thunder. And Chaz is just going, I can't quit. I can't do anything else. Without this costume, I'm not... And then we get a battery low sign. And we cut back into reality. So the whole thing was Cliff, Buddy's son, watching on his phone, and he, ran out of battery. And Buddy turns around and is like, Cliff, what are you watching back there? Better not be porn. And Cliff's like, oh my God, please don't ever say that again, Dad. No, stop. And the mom is Ellen's freaking out a little bit, wondering if they can't just go back home and call the cops. And Buddy's like, no, there's a lot of stuff back there, honey. Like, I know you don't want to deal with that, but we can't really go back there anytime soon. And they all start freaking out a little bit. Sox reminds them, look, we need to go find Alec Holland. He's also facing the rot as Swamp Thing. He will help us protect this girl. But he's like, well, whatever is going to happen better happen soon, because it's getting pretty dark out there. And we see a dead animal on the side of the road with flies all over it. And that's where we leave off the issue and the trade. I have always spoken highly of Animal Man. This issue does feel like a little bit of filler, but it's character-driven filler. It's like the Black Freighter stories in Watchmen. I know that's high praise, but it's informing the character of Buddy through the character he portrayed. He's getting older. This newer generation of people is like, he's not necessary anymore. He's a relic. He's not something that's needed as Animal Man because Maxine is there. So it's a nice little dive into the psyche, and I really like how they did it. John Paulian's art, may he rest in peace, fantastic. I cannot overstate how moody it looks and how it just has a completely different tone from the rest of the book while still feeling like the right tone. Like it still feels like, okay, this was a movie in this universe. It fits. And that's really hard for it to pull off of an in-universe complete tone swap. I really do enjoy that. So overall, I'm going to give this one an 8.5. That may be more reflective of the arc as a whole rather than just this issue, but it is still an extremely well done issue. And if you haven't checked out this volume of Animal Man in particular, I highly, 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 highly I very highly say that you should. Swamp Thing number 6, written by Scott Snyder, art by Marco Rudy. We left off last issue with Alec and Abby sharing a kiss, and at the exact same time, possibly by coincidence, possibly by fate, the professor from the issue that was infected by the rot made it to the Parliament of Trees and began burning it down, which Alec began to feel. This issue picks up with him feeling it. He hears screaming in his head from the green, and Abby's like, oh, I hear screams from the rot too, like a shriek inside your skull. Just block it out. And he's like, no, I've always heard the green, but this is different. This isn't screaming for me. This is screaming in fear. And the boy, William, he drops out of the tree at that point that he was being held captive in. And then all these vines, and I think they're vines, but they also could just be dead things because they're controlled by the rot. They start wrapping around Abby. And William is just goading Alec of how he lost and the Parliament is burning as Alec is desperately trying to get Abby out of these vines that are consuming her, and saying how they're screaming out in fear at you because this is all your fault. And William, I don't know if it's a thing through the green or what it is, but Alec is able to see through them that they are burning alive, and he can feel the pain and see this professor, and good Lord, the artistry on this. Absolutely fantastic. And Alec, he's solemn for a second, just saying how he didn't know. We see Abby is in this just eldritch abomination. Just this, like, I have no mouth, but I must scream sort of thing going on here. It is terrifying. But William just goes on. It's like, you knew all along what you had to do, but you chose not to fight. And he goes on this little allegory of how they used to play chess while he was in the hospital. And the chessboard they had was old and faded, but it still had almost all the pieces. It had everything except for the queens. Both the queens were missing. And on the day where William left and he killed everybody, he happened upon one of the queens just there, laying behind the radiator. And he thought it was just such irony that on the last day of her reign, she was right there to be found. And this entire thing is to this grotesque imagery of this bone world, this throne made of skulls and other bones, and all these bodies just holding it together in all these horribly deformed positions. But with the Queen story, Alec puts it together that the Black Queen, the one that he found, represents Abby. Abby was the one who was going to be the Rot's champion. It was always going to be her. William was just there to get her to accept it. And now she is finally there. She's finally ready to take it. And Alec is pleading, trying to get her to fight, but she just is begging Alec to kill her before she's forced to do that. And these birds, these vultures start coming in, and they're coming after Alec. And William suggests that Alec run, and Abby says the same to him, to just get out of here. Don't worry about saving her, just run. Alec refuses to. He's staying by her side. But then finally she uses part of her ability in the rot to use one of the vines and just whip him away. Just take him away and tell him to run before she ends up killing him. And he promises that he'll be back for her, but he hops on the motorcycle, drives away. These vultures are still giving chase, so he starts unloading a shotgun on them, and Abby screams out for them to leave him be, and they obey her. They 100% listen to her thing. And she says it's because he's of no concern to them now. And William just looks down on her grotesque, disgusting-looking sister and says, like, oh, she's become so beautiful, and just licks her face. And it's... God, this book is so messed up, man. So anyway, they pick up Abby's body still embalmed in these vines and saying that she can sleep while he carries her home to the Bone Kingdom where she'll be reborn. And then we cut back to Alec. He's made his way to a swamp. He strips out of his clothes, wades into it, and just begs for the Green to take him, to make him the Swamp Thing again, that he was wrong. But he was too late, and you can see the Parliament in their weakened state just saying, you were too late. We are dying and you have failed us. And in that moment, Alec gets as I can only assume, a full-on chainsaw to the back through his chest, and this undead thing holding on to it, along with other undead things just standing around. And we see William's face completely deformed and demonic, just saying checkmate. And that's where it ends. I love this book. If it wasn't obvious, I love this book. This is so good. It's so good. It's such a... I mean, right now, it's such a downer because it's just awful. But, like, they are doing things with layouts and just the sheer grotesqueness of it all that you don't see in any other mainstream comic book. You got to go with the indie stuff to get anywhere near there. And they were doing this in mainstream back in 2011 at the opening of a reboot where you needed as many people on board as possible. This is just fantastic. I really, absolutely love it. Obviously, like for any reader who's worth a damn, there's a Swamp Thing on the cover. Clearly we're going to get there somehow. I don't know how, which is good. They haven't made it obvious how we're going to get there, but clearly we're going to get there somehow. But no, this was just fantastic. Just, it really only one thing happened. Abby got taken and turned. That's it. That's the only thing that really happened. Because last issue is when they found the Parliament and started burning it. So this is the only thing that happened. But they managed to make it such an emotional beat with so many just small little things of Alec pleading for her not to, and then just like promising he wouldn't leave. Oh, it's perfect. It's fantastic. I'm honestly, screw it. I'm giving this one 9.5. The only thing that I am going to critique it on, the only reason it does not get the 10, is because of that tiny little bit of, we know that Alec isn't dead. Or if he is dead, we know that he's going to become Swamp Thing. Like, we know this isn't the end of the thing. I feel like that last page with the chainsaw is just cheapening it a little bit. If we just sat with him saying he's too late to do anything in this swamp, I think it would have been a perfect 10. Just that moment of somberness. But to have him just randomly killed in the last page just cheapens it that tiny little bit. But everything else, mwah, magnifique. I love it. Then that's it. That is all the comics that came out from DC Comics this February 1st, 2012. And believe it or not, we actually finished 5 trade paperbacks this episode. 5 whole books I can put back onto my shelf and never ever look at ever again. It really makes me feel like we're making progress through this. However, the downside is one of the books was Green Arrow Volume 1, which I was not a fan of. But Volume 2 is the start of the Ann Nocenti run, which lives in infamy. So if you thought I was bad on the book before, boy, you have not seen anything yet. But let's focus on the comics that are coming out next week. How about that? So February 8th, 2012 has the number 6 issues of Batman and Robin, Batgirl, Batwoman, Superboy, Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, Deathstroke, Grifter, Suicide Squad, Legion Lost, Demon Knights, Frankenstein, Agent of Shade, and Resurrection Man. Additionally, we have the number 5 issues of Huntress and Penguin, Pain and Prejudice. So, yeah, I still can't get the Green Arrow thing out of my head. Can we just cancel the show? Like, can I just stop? 22 episodes is, that's like a full season of most other things. I don't need to hit syndication levels. I can just live as a cult classic. I'm okay with that. So, if you have any opinions on the Ann Nocenti Green Arrow run coming up, any of the comics that are coming out next week, any of the comics that came out this week, or any comic I'm going to be talking about ever, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast. That is all one word, DC Comics Podcast. Use the hashtag New52 or don't. I genuinely do not care at this point. Additionally, we have a Patreon that you could pay into. You don't get any special stuff from me, but there is special stuff from pretty much every other corner of the Mild Fuzz TV network, as low as $1. And that is, of course, at Mild Fuzz TV on Patreon. That is Mild Fuzz TV. And a little pro tip, if you throw enough money at them, they'll just let you do a show about the New 52. Like, that is literally the only reason I'm here. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me, especially you, James. You know who you are. I don't even know if someone named James watches this show. We have a very limited audience as it stands right now. Anyway, before I start getting all into the analytics of the show, let me go ahead and just wrap things up and tell you to always remember that if it ain't broke, don't fix it.